Fred Ahmet. I'm president of the Bonner County Farm Bureau. The shade rule is the effort by the Department of Lands, the DEQ, the Fish and Wildlife Service in Idaho, to help protect stream temperature.
The 2014 Class 1 Tree Retention Rule, or Shade Rule, was approved by the Idaho Legislature after the Idaho Forest Practices Act Advisory Committee spent 10 years working with partners to create the rule, which deals with harvesting trees near Class 1 fish-bearing streams.
And it's been ongoing since about 2004 with studies and data collection, trying to determine how much cover over a stream is needed to maintain the temperature required for fisheries.
Class 1 streams are fish-bearing or used for domestic water use under the Forest Practices rules. The trees near streams provide shade that keeps water cool and which fish need to survive. Trees also occasionally fall across streams, providing large woody debris and nutrient cycling needed for fish habitat.
Well, the industry group has been working with the Department of Lands in coming up with a shade rule that can be predictable and consistent. And so they've tied into the studies that have been made, and they're comfortable with the program. Private forest owners are a little more concerned because they have a lot more at risk because their exposure is much higher if they have streams on their property, because the volume of timber that is affected by them is a higher percentage of their total overall timber base. There is some questions by private landowners on how the shade rule will work.
And that's what Tom MOSMAN struggles with. He farms outside of Nez Perce, Idaho, but also logs his land.
And in one case on our ranch, we have it's Little Canyon. It's a Class 1 stream, so there's fish in it. And it's a steelhead fisheries, and it's an important, vital piece of real estate for the fisheries, and we understand it, and we do everything we can to accommodate the steelhead in the spring of the year. So when I took the last logger down in there to try and figure out how we were going to do this and keep in compliance with the shade rule, there was, he just looked at it and said, well, with the amount of timber here, majority of it lays right down by the creek, and there's not enough other timber to even warrant cutting this timber. So I lost the timber sale of that whole tract of land. Yet when I paid my property tax, I didn't have any recourse but to pay the property tax at the going rate. To me, it was a taking. They took private property, they took my timber from me, and now I have no recourse. And what it hurts is the small landowners. The big timber companies with lots of acres in the forest, they just keep those buffer zones there because they got a lot of more acres. But when you're a private landowner, especially in these canyons, and they take the timber on both, or the ground on both sides of the stream, and stop you from cutting timber on it, it's a real hardship. There's a minimum amount of timber that has to be there, and if you're under that minimum amount, then you can't harvest any timber there. In most places, there's not as much timber on that, along those creeks, as they want, as the rules say there has to be. I mean, a little common sense would go a long way. So either loosen the rules or compensate us for losing that timber.
Well, it's important to realize, I think, that a cookie-cutter approach to the shade rule is not the best way to do it. Every stream is different. Every amount of timber covering that stream is different. And so to apply a single rule to every instance or every example of what might be encountered out in the woods is not the fairest way to do it with all landowners.